So it's early in the morning, and today I want to talk to you about cows, how amazing they are, and how I got started into cattle. But first thing I want to do is we want to go back and take a look at Amani, see if she's had her puppies yet. And that's her barking. Let's see what's going on over here. Oh. Yeah, how are you, baby? How are you, baby? Oh, here we go. Ooh, down. You are crazy. All right, let's go see. Do you have any babies? Huh? Do you have any babies? No babies. No babies today. So I'm actually hoping that she doesn't have the babies until this weekend, because I have a big surprise for her, and it's something for her and her babies, and I will show you what that is tomorrow. So as we're making our way up to the cows, let's feed a few animals along the way. And the first animals that I feed are these crazy dogs. This is Chicote, and he is a Saint Bernard, purebred Saint Bernard. And he is a big boy. Woo. Yeah. And he's crazy. Crazy. Alright, come over here. Sit. Watch me. Good boy. There you go. And he eats so fast, it's unbelievable. The next dog here is Amani. I have this little pen in the middle. Make sure I keep them separated. Alright, come on. Here we go. Right over here. Sit. Good. So she is about to have babies. And she's the mom. Chicote is the dad. And it's an interesting mix. One thing about Ridgebacks that's kind of cool is they're one of the, she's a Rhodesian Ridgeback. She's one of the longest living dogs that there is. The average lifespan is about 14, 15 years. On the contrary, Chicote here, being a Saint Bernard, he's already done. He's actually one of the, let me get this food bowl. He's actually one of the shortest lived dogs. Woo! Alright. He likes to grab his bowl and play. And Saint Bernards, unfortunately, they only live about 7 years. So, yeah, poor baby, huh? Yeah. So next up are the ducks. And when the ducks want food, they let you know. Usually give them 2 little piles of grain. And the thing they want even more than grain is head lettuce. They love head lettuce. Even more than anything else. Then the next animals to feed, finally, are the cows. And so they have some in here. What I usually do is I just add some to the top, and they kind of whittle that down. And they're all kind of hanging out in the loafing shed over there. So we'll come over here and I'll uncover the tarp and I'll get some hay. So then the last animal I feed is Iris, my Jersey cow. So if someone were to ask me how I got into cattle, I guess I'd say it was born out of a sense of curiosity. I had llamas for about 7 or 8 years, and having ducks and chickens and a few different barn animals, I guess, I decided to get into cows. And I guess it was the first cow that I had was actually this little black and white cow. I knew nothing about cows, and I thought, you know, it'd be interesting to get a cow. How much harder can it be compared to llamas? And picked up this little black and white cow. Didn't know anything about it, and it was a Holstein. Turns out it was a milk cow. And at the time, my sister-in-law was working at a dairy, and she was working with Holsteins actually, and she said 99% chance that cow is sterile. And I had never heard about sterile cows at all, and it turns out there's a thing called free Martinism. My first cow's name was Daisy. And like a little baby's seen a fly for the first time. She doesn't know what it is. Yeah, we're coming up on fly season. And anyway, Daisy, I guess free Martins are actually a twin, where one twin is a boy and one twin is a girl, basically a bull and a heifer. And the female gets masculinized by sharing the same blood as the bull, or the bull calf. And there's a blood test you can do, so I actually did a blood test, and sure enough, turns out that Daisy was a free Martin, which means she could never have a calf, never get pregnant, and a milk cow that can't get pregnant will never make milk. So that was my first lesson in cows. So then I decided I wanted another milk cow, because I thought getting milk was pretty cool. So then I got Iris, and this is Iris here, and when I got her, she was about as old as this little baby here, really friendly and sweet. And actually she was probably a little bit smaller because she was just off the mama cow. So at the dairies they take the calves off and milk them right away, and it produces, it keeps the cow from holding back the milk, so they can milk them a little bit easier. So then, after I got Iris, they said you're supposed to wait 2 years before you calve. So I waited 2 years, then I bought a bull, and Iris got pregnant, and I was planning on getting some milk from Iris, and then lo and behold, I found out there's this disease called brucellosis, and you have to get your calves vaccinated between 6 months and 12 months, or the vaccination doesn't work. And if you don't vaccinate a milk cow, you can never drink the milk, technically. So Iris missed the window for the vaccination, and technically we can never drink her milk. Lesson number 2, hard lesson number 2. So then I decided, you know, I started looking into how much work it is to milk cows. You have to milk them twice a day, and you know, different. It's, I don't know, I thought it was a lot more work than beef cattle. So then I decided to get into beef cows, and so that's when I started buying as many as I could. I think I bought 3 or 4 to start, and at this point I never have to buy any more cows, because, you know, this year I'm going to have maybe 5 or 6 calves, and unless I want to improve the genetics. So when I first started the whole project, I bought different cows from a bunch of different people, trying to mix up all the different genetics and lines so I could have a good herd that would breed. I got 2 different bulls for the genetics, and I should be able to breed these guys for a long time without having to worry about too much inbreeding. So let's talk about the growth rate and the expansion of the herd, which is probably one of the biggest challenges. So I actually started with this little tiny water feeder, and then I graduated to the other one that we were looking at earlier, and finally went to that 10-foot round water tank over there. And these guys, not only did they put down the hay, but they put down a lot of water. And one of the hardest parts of a growing cattle operation, I think, is if you get hundreds or thousands of cows, is to find a reliable water source. Because, I mean, this is like, I can't remember how many gallons this is, but you know, they'll drink it down in a week easily. And I usually put that other water tank out there just so they have something extra. If, you know, that one springs a leak somehow, they'll actually have another water source. So believe it or not, this cow is only like a month and a half old. When she was born, she weighed about 50 pounds. I'd say she's close to 100. But Angus cattle, they can actually grow at a rate of 100 pounds per month, which is pretty incredible. It can even exceed that in a feedlot if they're feeding antibiotics and hormones and feeding the right mixture of grains. But the herd grows at an exponential rate. So these bulls are only like 3 years old. These are probably as big as they'll get. But, and you know, within a year, it's pretty amazing, because with 10 cows, every month I could potentially have another 1,000 pounds of beef that I have to feed and water. And then on top of that, they have calves, and all those calves grow at 100 pounds a month. And then it almost gets out of control, and the more you have, the faster it grows. And there comes to a point where you just have to decide which size of a herd that you want, and then kind of cut it off from there. So for me, I kind of decided this is kind of the perfect size, just enough cows to fill my feeder, and probably just sell the rest. So if you're thinking about cows, getting into cows for the money, I would walk away if I were you. There's not a lot of money in cattle. There's really thin profit margins. I'd say if you're making money, you have some kind of a trick or something that a lot of people go to the sales, and they pick up cheap cows, feed them out and sell them real quick just to kind of turn them to make a profit. The problem is hay and feed prices vary wildly. This year was a terrible year for hay. There's a lot of people panicking. So normally on a good year I'll pay, you know, $5 a bale for feed for the cows. This year hay went up to $13 a bale for a 50-pound bale. And there's no way you could feed these cows for that. And that's one of the reasons I went to the big bales, because I can get a big bale for an equivalent of $5 or $6 for 50 pounds. And I'd say at $5 a bale, I'm basically breaking even. If I can find hay cheaper, like $1 or $2 a bale, that they'll actually eat, then I'm actually coming out way ahead. So speaking of that money, I was reading an article in one of the major cattle magazines, or maybe it was online, that said if you take all the ranchers with 100 cows or less and you pay them $30,000 a year, they're actually losing money. So you need a lot of cows to make a decent living. And then there's those people that, you know, if you have a ranch, you basically do it for the lifestyle. I do it just for the love of the animal, because, I mean, how many people have a couple 2,000-pound bulls that they can call their own. It's pretty awesome. And I'd say my favorite part of the whole thing with cattle is the baby cows. You know, they come, for me, you know, I do it completely opposite. So look at this little baby. They are so friendly. They're just like little puppy dogs. Yeah. So if you look at 100 different cattle operations, you'll see 100 different ways to raise cows. And I've yet to see one that's raising cattle like I am, just for the fun of it, basically, just for the love of the animal. So most people, if you're trying to make money, what you'll do is you'll calve really early in the spring, and there's a danger there because a lot of people lose cows from being so cold. But the earlier you can calve them, they want to basically put as much weight on as possible so they can sell them in the fall. And I do it completely opposite. So what I do is, there's a lot of people that have to pull their calves, and I've read a lot of articles, and I think one of the main reasons that cows have a hard time birthing is because they're birthing in cold weather, and it's because everybody calves early in the spring. So I have yet to have to pull a calf, and I calve midsummer and mid to late summer, and my theory is to run the calves through the winter and then sell them in the spring, because in the spring the price for calves is really high because nobody really has calves for sale. So I'm selling when nobody else has calves, and I'm calving when nobody else is calving. But there's downsides to that whole process too. One of the biggest things is when the calves are just before they sell in the spring, I'm burning through a lot of hay because I'm feeding all the cows plus all their calves. So I don't know, it's better for the animal, but I don't know if it's better for the bottom line. But every decision that I like to make, I always make it for the animal. So let's talk about milk cows. So milk cows are totally different beasts than beef cows. Beef cows can eat almost anything. You could feed them newspapers or phone books or anything edible that has cellulose in it, and they'll actually maintain their body condition. They'll eat it before a milk cow will. And I have one milk cow. Her name's Iris. She's a Jersey, and you can see her udder is really big. And when she's in milk, she'll put on probably she'll put out like 5 gallons of milk per day, and she actually loses weight like crazy unless you feed her a lot of extra grain. So the disadvantage of milk cows is you have to feed them a lot of grain, but you get milk. And in a beef cow, I think what you really want is a cow that that doesn't produce a lot of milk, because the less milk that it produces, the more beef it'll produce, or muscle mass, I should say. So this girl, it'll be interesting. This one right here, 1002, her name's Scylla. She's actually half beef and half Jersey. So when she calves, her calf will be 3/4 Angus and only 1/4 Jersey. And what I found on Iris's calves, so I actually let Iris's calves drink all of her milk, so they're drinking like 5 gallons a day of milk, and they grow like rockets. So when I sell her calves, they're like 150 pounds heavier than my beef cattle calves, just because they're drinking so much milk. It's pretty incredible. So the other thing that fluctuates a lot, if you're looking at finances and beef cows, is the price per cow and the price per hay. So normally what happens is, when I bought a lot of these cows, beef was really high, and it's come down probably 50%. Check it out. I tried out this new sulfur block, and it seems like it's a pretty big hit with the cows. It's like salt and sulfur together. It's supposed to keep the flies away. I don't know if it'll work. But anyway, so normally what happens, it's kind of a supply and demand thing. So if hay is really bad like it was this winter, the price goes really high. So then everyone thinks, oh, they start panicking. I got to get rid of all my cows. So they bring all their cars to the sale barn because they don't want to buy the hay. So now there's a flood of cows and a huge supply, and it drives the price down. So then what happens is there's not many cows the following year, so not many people are burning up all the hay. So then hay prices come way down because there's an excess supply of hay, and it tends to teeter-totter like that, back and forth. If hay's really high, beef's low. If beef is really high, hay is low. It's kind of almost counterintuitive the way it works. So some people think they can get ahead by running cows out on pasture, which in most cases you can. But I'd say if you're buying land, then you have a land payment. And a lot of times, unless you have irrigated land, it's still pretty a tough sale because the quality of the grass and the forage on the land kind of goes up and down with the weather. So I can get land really cheap. I can actually get it for $1,000 an acre way out in no man's land, but it's not really good grazing land, and there's very few places with water, so it'd be a tough sale, to run cattle out. Some people try. I would say if you're running cattle on land, if I was to completely start over, and what I would do is I would sell all my cows. I'd pack up shop and I'd move down south. I'd move down probably to Florida or Georgia or somewhere in the where it rains a lot and there's warm weather. You have long seasons, maybe even like Hawaii. It's always 75 degrees. You never have to cut hay, or hardly ever have to cut hay. I think that's where you could really come out ahead with cattle. So another interesting thing about cows is I realize that right now I have a worldwide audience. And here in the United States, in America, in Colorado, things are completely different than like over in India or other parts of the world. Here, it's a Black Angus beef kind of state. I mean, I tell all my friends, hey, I have Black Angus, and every single one of them, the only thing they recognize or correlate with Black Angus is the fried steak on their plate. And everyone wants to eat all my cows. And I actually worked with this girl. She was from Nepal, and over in Nepal it was a little bit different. They believed that if you commit murder, you go to jail for 10 years, but if you kill a cow, it's even worse, and you go to jail for life. Which is pretty amazing. It's almost like they worship the cow. So it's almost completely opposite of the culture over here in America. And for me, I don't know if I could eat my own cows. I'd rather just raise them up and then sell them. Actually, my last one was Iris's bull calf, and I steered him from last year, and I sold him as a pet because he was so friendly. The guy said he was never going to kill him, and he was just going to last on the farm until he fell over dead. And that just kind of makes me happy when I see my cows go to a place like that. And then I sold another calf. I wasn't really upset about that one getting used as a beef cow because it was actually an Angus heifer that I ran down on Pueblo one year on the pasture, and she calved out in the open pasture, and that calf wasn't used to people, and That calf was so wild. I brought him back and he was just jumping and kicking. You couldn't even get close to him. And I wanted to get rid of him really bad because he just didn't really fit in with the group here. And I sold him to a guy who was gonna feed him out and use him as a beef cow and sell the beef. So it's kind of hard seeing him go like that, but so far that's the only one I've let go. So another thing you may be wondering is why I have two bulls. They actually got along pretty good. I've heard of people having multiple bulls. And T-Bone here, he was sniffing iris. He was the biggest one, so it works good having two bulls if you have one bigger and one smaller. And then they got to the point where they were almost the same size, and they used to fight until neither one of them could hardly stand up. They beat each other up so bad. And now they just kind of have a mutual respect for each other. So it works pretty good. Yeah. He wants to be friendly. Yeah. Another thing that's interesting about cows is they don't have teeth on the top. And they can't chew stuff up like a horse. They just have teeth on the bottom, which is kind of interesting. The other thing about friendly cows is you can kind of check their teeth when they're licking you, and you can kind of see if they have all their teeth or if any of them are broken. And these bulls, they tend to break teeth easier when they're fighting each other for the girls. So basically with two bulls in here, all these heifers are pregnant, these cows. So speaking of cows, calves, heifers, it's kind of interesting. People say, well, how many cows do you have? And I actually have 9 cows here, but they're not all cows. 2 are bulls, so you don't count those. And then a calf, you don't count that as a cow. And then I have a couple heifers. So a heifer is basically a cow that hasn't given birth yet. So technically she's not a cow. So I got a couple here from last year that'll calve for the first time. And then for example, this girl, Penelope's mom, had her first calf this year. So that makes her a first calf heifer. So technically she's still not a cow. And you're not really a cow per the definition unless you've had 2 calves. So Iris just had her second calf last year, which made her finally a cow. The other thing I kind of struggle with is the cleanliness of the cows. So you see Iris is kind of messed up, and they all kind of, if they get too close, they'll kind of poop and pee on each other. And the worst, absolute worst thing, a lot of it depends on the amount of protein you feed. So I'm feeding a pretty medium protein grass hay that keeps their stools pretty solid, but still gives them some body weight, which is just, I found it's about the perfect mix. So I can actually buy alfalfa cheaper, and it has a lot more protein in it, but it gives them all the runs, and they all squirt on each other, and it gets really nasty real quick. And a lot of cattle guys will say, I'm looking for hay, but I don't want any alfalfa. And probably what they're doing is they're running cattle like this on in a dry lot like this without any pasture, and they're worried about all the cows squirting on each other, and you're out here with the hose every day hosing them down. It's not a pretty sight. So that's my cows, pretty much all I can say about my cows. So I've really enjoyed having them, and I also enjoy beef and a good leather jacket and a leather pair of boots. So but I don't know, it's being a rancher, it's kind of you know, kind of a play on morals, and you know, they're actually a farm animal and they have a purpose, and it's universally considered a food item, basically. And I don't know, it's a lot different than if you're living in a city and you have pets, because I mean, I live in Park County, Colorado, and in Park County they encourage people to raise cattle, and I think because the weight gain is so high, and you can feed so many people off of just a few cows because they produce so much beef in a short amount of time. But I don't know, I still really like my cows. And I think I have a unique relationship compared to most ranchers. I can imagine running them out where I don't, you know, touch them and play with them and interact with them all the time. It would just be completely different for me. So, hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.